They're ordering jets from China, not as a publicity stunt, not as some weird political favor, real commercial airliners that will carry real passengers around the world. And if that sounds impossible, or even a little suspicious, that's because this whole story is happening behind the scenes, far away from the usual aviation headlines we're used to seeing. For decades, the world of commercial aviation has been almost comically predictable. Two names have ruled the skies for as long as most of us have been alive: Boeing in the United States and Airbus in Europe. If you've ever flown on a commercial flight, there's a near certain chance the plane was made by one of those two. They've built fleets for every major airline, trained generations of pilots, and set the standard for how airplanes are designed, built, and serviced. Together, they've held on to more than 90% of the global passenger aircraft market, creating what many call a duopoly, a polite way of saying that airlines haven't really had much of a choice. But there's a new player in town, a company most people outside China have never heard of: COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China. And while they're still the underdog by a massive margin, their presence is starting to make the duopoly look more like a three-way race. This isn't some startup tinkering in a garage. It's a state-backed aerospace giant with government funding, political backing, and a very clear mission: break the Boeing Airbus monopoly and put Chinese-built aircraft into skies all over the world. At the heart of COMAC's ambitions is a plane called the C919, a single-aisle jet designed to go head-to-head with the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320, the undisputed workhorses of modern aviation. These are the planes that make the world go round, the ones carrying millions of passengers on short and medium-haul routes every single day, connecting major hubs with smaller cities and forming the backbone of almost every airline's fleet. COMAC's pitch is bold but straightforward. We can do it too, and we can do it for less. And they're not stopping there. Alongside the C919, they've developed a smaller regional aircraft, the C909, aimed at shorter domestic and intercity routes, the kind that keep airlines profitable and passengers constantly moving. Beyond that, engineers are deep into work on a wide-body jet meant to challenge Boeing's Dreamliner and Airbus's A330, a move that would put COMAC into the highly competitive long-haul market. But before they conquer the skies on every front, COMAC knows the real battle starts with trust. Getting airlines to believe that their flagship jet can match decades of reliability from Boeing and Airbus isn't easy, yet a growing number of carriers, particularly in Asia and emerging markets, are beginning to take that leap. Every new order, every new delivery is another signal to the world that China isn't just building airplanes, it's building credibility. So why would any airline even consider buying planes from a company that's still so new to the game? The answer is surprisingly simple: because they're desperate. Over the past few years, Boeing and Airbus have been buried under mountains of orders, many of them delayed by supply chain issues, pandemic disruptions, or manufacturing slowdowns. In some cases, an airline that places an order today won't see delivery for 6 or 7 years. That's not a minor inconvenience, that's a major operational problem. Airlines need new aircraft to open routes, replace aging fleets, and keep up with demand. But they're stuck waiting. COMAC, on the other hand, is practically begging for customers. Their order books are much thinner, which means they can offer faster delivery slots. For smaller airlines in particular, especially those in rapidly growing markets across Asia and Africa, that's a huge advantage. Why wait until 2031 for a Boeing when a Chinese jet can be delivered in 2027? Airlines operate on tight margins and tighter schedules, and time is money. COMAC knows this and is using it as leverage. Then there's the price. A Boeing 737 MAX can cost around $120 million before discounts. COMAC's C919 is significantly cheaper on paper, and once you factor in state-backed subsidies, government financing, and sweetheart deals, the final price tag can drop dramatically. Reports suggest that airlines could pay as little as $50 to $60 million per aircraft, less than half the price of a Western competitor. That's not just competitive, that's irresistible. And when you're an airline trying to build a fleet on a budget, those savings can translate into entirely new routes, more planes, or lower ticket prices. But the real reason some airlines are entertaining Chinese planes goes beyond economics. It's about relationships. Buying from COMAC isn't just buying a plane, it's buying goodwill from Beijing. For countries involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative, that can mean easier trade negotiations, better infrastructure investment deals, or preferential treatment on future projects. Airlines don't operate in a vacuum. They're often influenced by government policy and international relations. If buying a few Chinese jets makes life easier elsewhere, that's a calculation many executives are willing to make. There's also a growing sense that depending entirely on Boeing and Airbus is risky. Airlines have seen firsthand how a single grounding, like the one that followed the 737 MAX disasters, can throw global operations into chaos. They've seen supply chains choke under pressure and delivery timelines stretch into oblivion. And with geopolitical tensions rising between China and the West, relying on only two Western manufacturers feels more fragile than it used to. Even if COMAC isn't perfect, having a third option on the table is a form of insurance. Still, airlines aren't lining up around the block for Chinese planes just yet, and for good reason. There are major obstacles standing in COMAC's way, and they're not easy to overcome. The biggest one is certification. Right now, the C919 is certified only by Chinese regulators. That means it can't legally operate in the US, Europe, or most of the developed world without approval from the FAA or EASA, and those approvals take years. Until then, COMAC's potential market is limited to countries that are willing to accept China's regulatory standards. Another hurdle is the plane itself. Despite China's push for domestic innovation, many of the C919's most critical components, from its engines to its flight control systems, are built by Western suppliers. That creates a geopolitical vulnerability. If relations between China and the West sour further, export restrictions could cripple production overnight. It's a delicate situation. The very countries COMAC hopes to compete against still control much of its supply chain. Even if COMAC can deliver planes, airlines have other concerns. Maintenance, support, spare parts. These things make or break an aircraft purchase. Boeing and Airbus have spent decades building global service networks. If a plane needs a part in Brazil or a repair in Kenya, there's already a system in place. COMAC doesn't have that, and when airlines think about the resale value of their fleet, a huge consideration in long-term planning, they worry that a Chinese-built jet might be harder to offload later. And then there's the elephant in the cabin: trust. Aviation is built on reputation. Boeing and Airbus have decades of proven safety records, countless flight hours, and fleets operating in every corner of the globe. COMAC has a handful of planes flying short-haul domestic routes. That's not a knock on their engineering, but trust takes time to build, and airlines don't gamble with passenger confidence. Despite all that, COMAC is making progress, and faster than many expected. Brunei's Galapair placed a $2 billion order for 30 COMAC jets, a mix of C919 and C909. Air Cambodia signed on for 20 regional jets. Tibet Airlines ordered 40 C919s and 10 smaller aircraft to serve its high-altitude routes. And AirAsia, one of the largest low-cost carriers in the world, has openly expressed frustration with Airbus delays and is in advanced talks with COMAC for future orders. Even some Latin American and African airlines have begun exploratory discussions. There are signs that COMAC is playing a longer, more strategic game too. In 2025, the company proposed buying a majority stake in Lao Airlines, a move that would give it direct influence over fleet decisions and ensure a captive customer for its aircraft. That's not just selling planes, that's rewriting the business model entirely. And while COMAC's international certification might still be years away, the company is already planning for that day. It's working on expanding service networks, negotiating maintenance partnerships, and even exploring joint ventures to make the C919 more appealing to foreign buyers. And every year, as more Chinese planes enter service, COMAC gains something money can't buy: operational data. The more flights their planes complete, the more confident regulators and airlines will become. If you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the implications of all this are enormous. For the first time in modern history, Boeing and Airbus face a credible challenger. COMAC doesn't need to dominate the market to change it. Even a small shift, say capturing 10% of global orders by 2040, would force prices down, delivery times up, and innovation forward. It would give airlines more negotiating power and potentially reshape how aircraft are designed, built, and sold. It also means aviation could become more political than ever. In the future, choosing a plane might not just be about fuel efficiency or seating capacity. It might be about aligning with the right side of a global power struggle. A European airline might reject COMAC to stay in Washington's good graces. A Southeast Asian carrier might embrace it as part of a deeper economic partnership with Beijing. Airplanes have always been symbols of power, but soon they could become tools of diplomacy in ways we haven't seen before. For passengers, the changes might be subtle at first. You'll board a plane that looks and feels like any other. The seats will still be cramped, the Wi-Fi will still be slow, and the pretzels will still taste like cardboard. But under the paint and behind the tray tables, the plane itself might be something new, built not in Seattle or Toulouse, but in Shanghai. And you might not even notice. That's the point. COMAC isn't trying to reinvent the experience of flying. They're trying to quietly slip into an industry that hasn't changed in half a century and carve out a piece of it for themselves. And if they succeed, it won't just change how airlines buy planes, it'll change who controls the skies. The idea of a Chinese-built jet flying you from Paris to Singapore might have sounded far-fetched 10 years ago. Today, it's looking more and more inevitable. The duopoly that once felt untouchable is starting to crack. And through that crack, a new contender is climbing. One that's patient, ambitious, and determined to play the long game. So the next time you're sitting in 23A, sipping your lukewarm coffee and watching clouds drift by, remember, the plane you're on might not be what you think. The logos on the seats might still say your favorite airline, but the name stamped on the fuselage could soon be one you've never noticed before. One that tells a much bigger story about where the world is headed. And if this glimpse into the future of flight surprised you, think about how different the skies might look 10 or 20 years from now. More competition, more options, more choices, and maybe, just maybe, a quiet little Chinese company will have reshaped an entire industry while the rest of us were still complaining about airplane food. If that's not a story worth watching, I don't know what is. If you found this fascinating, drop a comment below with your prediction. Which major airline do you think will be the first to add a Chinese jet to its fleet? And if you want to follow how stories like this unfold in real time, make sure you stick around, because this is only the beginning of how the aviation world is being rewritten.